Is your debt causing you sleepless nights? Knock your debt out with Debt KO. And your debt won't be the only thing keeping you up at night. Debt KO, free, impartial advice on all your debt.
Makes a change. At least I can get a word in today. When I'm at home, I'm not allowed the old missus on me here. Oh, I can't get a word in.
That was on record.
All right, put it out. Right.
This is UMAR for IFL TV in association with MCK Global. I'm joined by Frank Warren, of course. At the time we're recording this, nearly celebrates his 40th year in boxing. It's close to that mark. Been some ride, Frank, eh?
It has. I'll tell you one thing. It's flown by. It really has flown by. When I look back at it and I think to myself, where's it all gone? Is this old geezer sitting here? And and I look at some of the photos we've been going through for the book that I've done, and looking at, I look like I was still at school in some of them. So I don't know where it's all gone, mate.
I've always wanted to know this, and I don't know the answer, so this will be quite interesting. What were you doing before you got into boxing?
I was in the machine business. I was in, we put in pool tables and machines into pubs and clubs.
And that was going well?
At the time, I was unbeknown to me that, well, you read about it in my book, there's another name in there that would be quite interesting. But that's what I was doing, yeah. And I had a couple of nightclubs and pubs.
Okay. So why did you get into boxing?
I got in there by accident. There was, in those days, they called it unlicensed boxing, but it was licensed. And I got a relation on my uncle Bob, my late uncle Bob's wife, my aunt Kathy, on her side of the family. Lenny McLean was her nephew, so was that like a second cousin, whatever you call it. And I got involved through him. We went to watch him fight a guy called Roy Shaw. About 1970, probably about 76, 77. I can't remember the exact date. Somewhere around that time, 77, and. A place called Sinatra's in Croydon. Sinatra's, it was spelt with a C. Oh. And I went to see that fight, and he was on the. He came out. He caught Roy Shaw with a punch. Roy Shaw was an ex-fighter. I think he just come out of prison at the time, and he hit Lenny McLean. Sorry, Lenny hit him, wobbled him, and he never threw another punch. He just went into the corner, crossed his arms like that in the corner. And said, go on in. And he must have hit him about 60 times and eventually just slid down the ropes.
What did he do that for?
Don't even ask me. Some macho thing. Anyway, afterwards we went to the dressing room. We just went there as spectators. We went to the dressing room afterwards. And my uncle bollocked him, said, what do you let someone do that to you for, as you just said? Exactly the same thing. And that was it. Anyway, we left about a couple of months later. He came and said they want to do a rematch. And... He'd arranged a rematch, and the rematch was again going to be at the same place, at Sinatra's.
With a C.
Yeah, and at that time I was only young. I'd say I'd interest in quite a few things. And cut a long story short, he was in a. He was told if he wins the fight, he's going to have some problems. This was all outside the auspices, but the boxing board control that he was. Basically, that if he lost the fight, he was going to have some problems. So don't even ask me how. I wound up in his corner that night with my uncle, so we were his cornerman.
How many corners did you do?
I'd done about three with him. He lost a couple. Lost against Sid Paddock. Lost twice against Cliff Fields. Perhaps we should have told me for a cornerman. But I'd worked in corners with other fighters. I worked with Joe Bugden. I worked with all the fighters that I signed in the early days. I worked their corners. I was in the gym, we were training with them. All the young fighters back then. And then obviously got more and more busy with the promotions, and that was it.
Of course, when your name's said it's always associated with having an eye for talent and matchmaking effectively. Do you think doing them corners and being around the sport at such a young age helped you in what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think look, a lot of it's common sense, but you can spot talent, and it's a funny thing. I mean, in those days, you didn't have a squad system like you've got today with the Olympics. You know, guys didn't get money to go on, getting paid as amateurs to go and fight. They had their jobs and so forth. And then you had ABA fighters. So all these fighters all fought in the ABAs, and the best went through to fight and got picked to represent the country for the Olympics. And we didn't used to win a lot of medals back then in the Olympics. And when I look at some of the guys that we, certainly that we got early days, and a couple that went on to do some good things, I was quite pleased because a couple of them were just people didn't fancy them at all, and they'd done fairly well.
So how did you wind up from doing a few corners, being around in the sport, to then getting a license for promoting?
Well, I didn't work as I had to promote us. What happened with Lenny, after he knocked Shaw out in the second fight, then there was going to be another fight, a rubber match, and we went to the people who was involved with him at the time. You can read about this in the book. I'm going to mention it a few times.
That was the second time in 5 minutes.
Yeah, but I've worked it out. I've got to do one mention every 2.5 minutes. And we went to their offices, and they offered him stupid money. It was like crap money. I didn't even know how much he was even getting paid back then. All I was doing, my uncle and I, we were having bets. So their side had put up a few quid. We'd have put up a few quid. I remember the East London Advertiser held about a 25 or 40 grand bet back then, which was a lot of money back in the 70s. It was quite a bit of money. So we had some big bets, and that's where we got involved. And we went to this meeting, and they decided that they went and offered him crap money. And he'd knocked Roy Shaw out, and I said, and I was just sitting there. My uncle was doing all the talking, and I just turned around, don't even ask me why. Said, well, fuck you, we'll do that. What do we need you for? And that's what happened. So that was how I got into promoting. We came out of there. I didn't know what on earth I said it for. My uncle looked at me like I was mad, and next minute I was in the promotion business.
How old were you when you said that?
I was about, what would I have been? About 25.
Okay. You don't have any idea why you said that?
Well, I just didn't like the idea of, I suppose, what they were saying. We're doing it, and this is what you've got to take. So I said to them, well, we need you, we'll do it ourselves.
So that passion for looking after the fight has always been there, clearly. Even if you didn't
I think more then it was not so much looking after Lenny. I mean, Lenny could look after himself. He's a big old lump, but it was more about I didn't like. I suppose I was sitting there, and I just didn't like what was being said. And my uncle didn't stand for no nonsense anyway. So, but anyway, we came out of there, and next minute we're putting a show on. It wasn't against Shaw. So we told it to Solly. He fought a guy called Solly Francis, who was a doorman, because most of them were doormen. He worked on the room at the top in Ilford. Real tough old guy was, tough guy. And he had these two blokes, and I'm not being disrespectful, I can't remember their names. They were two really nice fellas. And we put the fight together, and we had a bet. Each side put a few quid up, and we did it at the Rainbow, which was the old Finsbury Park Astoria, which I remember going back there when I was a kid, seeing the Stax Vault tour. Otis Redding there when I was much younger. But anyway, that's where we did it. So we did our first big show there, and then after that, he fought Roy Shaw, a couple of other fights, and that was it. I mean, he did a book. He said it. I think when he was diagnosed with cancer, and he wrote a book saying he'd had like 3,000 fights or something, and they were.
3,000?
That's what you read about. It's like over a 10-year period. That's 300 fights a year. I mean, people buy into this. But he lost to Clifffield twice, as I said. He lost to Paddock. He lost to and he had he had his first loss against Roy Shaw. And then he went off and done his own thing. So in the meantime, I formed then the National Boxing Council, which was. Against against the Boxing Board of Control. I wasn't licensed by the Boxing Board, so we formed our own governing body, got medicals in and so forth, and I ran quite a few shows doing that, and then I got asked by the Boxing Board of Control, somebody there, famous old journalist called Wally Bartleman, and he come from Islington, and he used to write for the Standard, and he did Standard. I remember him, and he had real old cockney. He just said, "Why are you fucking about with all that crap? Come and get yourself a licence." and that's how I went and got my licence. And boxing board, I think they wanted me in the tent rather than outside. So that's what happened.
So what venues around London were you doing shows at?
Well, when I started off, there weren't any. In those days, Mickey Duff, Jarvis Astaire, Harry Levine and Mike Barrett operated. They had exclusives on the venues. Jarvis was I don't know if he was on the board of directors at Wembley Arena, so I couldn't get him there. And the Albert Hall, Mike Barrett had an exclusive on. So there weren't any. There was no venues. So my first show was at the Bloomsbury Crest Hotel. You could get about 1,400 people in there. It's like a hotel ballroom. So I did my first show there. I brought 2 Americans over and absolutely done my brains. Done my brains. It's funny, there was hardly anybody in there. You could have had a blunderbuss and shot it. You wouldn't have hit anyone. For some reason it never. Because we were getting quite good turnouts at our shows before that, and it was quite empty. And I think it's quite ironic that I'm going to be doing a show on the 5th of December at the Royal Albert Hall and there's going to be no one there. But it is what it is,
With the heavyweight champion of the world.
Yeah, with heavyweight. That's a bit. You come from it, so it come from. How did I get into this position? I'm now promoting the heavyweight champion of the world, but there's still no people here.
Of course, along this career, Frank, you would have helped. Well, the vast majority of fighters would have been inner city kids growing up and around council estates, in council estates, a bit like yourself growing up. So you know what it is like growing up around the inner city area, especially in London. So that must mean a lot that you've helped so many people become financially secure where they weren't wealthy to begin with.
Well, I've helped. They've obviously got a talent.
Yeah.
They've got to have their talent, and there's a lot of sacrifices, and I like to think I've contributed, and through. Sometimes I like to think, with the knowledge that I've gained over the years, that I've helped direct them in the right way and made the right moves. As I always say, timing's very important in boxing, and it's the same in matchmaking, that we've made the right moves at the right time. And the fact that I did come from I lived in Priory Green Estate in Islington, tough part of Islington. And that's where I grew up, and and I was out of school when I was 14 and a half. I went to a grammar school. I passed my 11 plus, but I just didn't suddenly fell out of love with it, and I never went back again.
Were you good at school?
I used to be in the top 3. I was quite good. I hasn't passed my 11 plus, so I must have had a little bit of grey matter there. And passing 11 plus, where I come from, was like going to university, but it was at that age. But I had an interest in life, and no one give us anything. They go out and fight for it, It wasn't like my kids now. I'm in a position where I'll be able to give them get them into the sport, and with the benefit of what I've built on, and excuse me, they brought a lot of themselves in here, and obviously with their ideas have helped us, get to where we are today. We've all worked very hard, but no one gave me sod all. I was fighting a system. There was only 2 TV companies. There was BBC Television and ITV. BBC had the exclusive deal with the cartel, so you couldn't get a look in at the BBC. And ITV, the only fights they ever showed were overseas fights, like the Sugar Ray Leonards, or the big fights from the States. So you couldn't get a look in. Could not get a look in. So there was no TV. First shows I did, we didn't have any TV on the shows. It took me a while to get some television, but I kept fighting. My very first show, I broke the cartel's stranglehold on BBC television. Stopped that, and we got I got Clinton McKenzie in with Steve Early. McKenzie and Early were both with Mickey Duff as promoters, and I'd managed. Clinton came to see me. He was very pissed off. Clinton's a lovely guy. His brothers and all that are all big boxing sport family in London, and I helped him. He'd come to see me, and I said to him, make the fight go to purse bids, and I'll win it. I promise you I'll win it. And I'll put in the biggest bid, which is what I did. And then BBC didn't want to show it, and you can read about how it all happened in my book. But it was I enjoyed it, and I got it on there, and I got it on BBC at the end, and that was the only show I did on BBC. And then eventually got ITV involved, I signed quite a few good amateurs up, and I signed Joe Bugner, brought Joe Bugner back, who was a bloody good heavyweight, Joe Bugner, you know, back then. It took off from there.
Was there a moment, because of the cartel and the deals, exclusive deals they had, where you just thought, I'm going to pack this in?
No, do me a favour. I was having the best fun of my life. It was a challenge. Well, I didn't even look at it as a challenge. It was just like, I'm doing this, and I'm going to make it happen, and I did it and made it happen. You know, I never had nothing behind me, nothing at all. It was just me, and I'm like, you know, Jarvis went on to be was the chairman of Wembley then went on during that period become chairman of Wembley. They had all the venues, the TV. There weren't one of them. It was the whole system, and they had the boxing board of control, because everything at the boxing board of control up until then, they never had to make any decisions. The boxing board of control, it all run along smoothly. Suddenly in comes the pest, driving everyone mad, and they got to make some decisions, and they didn't like that. and it took me a while to, you know, to get my feet under the table there. It took me a few years, but I was never going to take no for an answer, and I just kept crashing away, and eventually got come through.
Of course, that persistence paid off, and I think it's fair to say some of the most glorious years you've had was with Prince Naseem AHMED. What was your first recollection, or what's your first memory of Nas?
Brendan Ingle was his manager and trainer, and Brendan and I never really got hit it off. Late Ernie Fossey was my matchmaker, and Brendan, they didn't have a great relationship, and obviously he was with me Ernie, so I followed suit, and we just didn't. For some reason, there was nothing going there, and then he called me one day. Sorry, that's not true. The editor of Boxing News back then was Harry Mullen, late Harry Mullen, and he was a lovely bloke, Harry. Me and him used to go and have lunch every month, and he really, really loved his boxing. For him, his dream job was to become the editor of Boxing News, and Boxing News had a big circulation back then, big circulation. And he said, Brendan's asked if I'd meet with him. So I said, yeah, write it down. I said, come down to my house. So he came down, we met, brought Naz down, skinny little kid, plenty to say for himself, oozing with confidence. And I think by then he'd had about 7 or 8 fights. He'd had a couple with Barry Hearn, and he had a few with Mickey Duff. But nothing had happened. You know, they'd done nothing with him. And I'm talking to him, and I'd seen a couple of clips, and I knew, and having met him, I knew what I could do. I knew what I could bring to the party. So we done the deal, and I said to Brendan, no one, you know, because he was quite paranoid about someone's going to try and steal the management and so forth. I said that, you know, don't even go there. All I'm interested in doing is doing what we've done. You just keep doing what you're doing, training, looking after him, and I'll do what I've got to do. And that was it. And I went to see Bob Burrows, who was then head of sport at Thames Television. In those days, ITV was all regions. You had like Yorkshire TV Central, it was all made up of different regions before it all amalgamated. And he, you know, Thames Television obviously was in London. And I said, and we were doing fights on a Wednesday night. We used to do Wednesday night fights and live on TV. And I said, I want Naz. I want a kid on. He went to me, well, I'm not sure. I said, I don't want no money. Let's just do the show. We did it in show. I said, just put him on. I said, but you're going to pay afterwards. You're going to pay me afterwards. And Naz, I think 6.5 million people at 11:30 at night watched it back then. And he just caught the imagination, and then we just promoted the life out of him. I identified his audience then, because my kids were all young then, and kids, you know, I had young children, and they were talking about sort of things like you know, Ninja Turtles and whatever else was around in those days. So I was quite on, you know, if the kids are telling their talking to their dads and their mums and dads about what they're seeing, and Naz sort of caught a little bit of the imagination of the youngsters. So we then made a concerted effort to promote him with young kids magazines, young kids programming. I mean, I'm talking about young kids, like, you know, 13, 14, 15-year-olds. Yeah. And the rest was history. He suddenly caught on, and he was great. But it was tremendous fun. It was unbelievable. I loved every moment of it. It's a bit like working with Tyson, because Tyson's fun. You know, it was like that. It was just a laugh. We was all laughing all the time. But like all these things, the laughter stops. People start getting in the middle of it, causing problems, and that's what happened. And I walked away. I walked away from it. I didn't want it anymore. He had his fight in Atlantic City against Wayne McCulloch, and that was my lot. I got on a plane, and I never spoke to him again for about 3 or 4 years, maybe longer, 5 years.
Okay.
But we're good mates now, and we look back. It's a funny thing, when a relationship's split up, and it happens in boxing, it happens in all walks of life. We all know that. It happens in football, it happens in, motor racing. A driver will go from one team to another, sometimes acrimoniously, and it happens. But what you lose is that little bond, because there's only a small inner circle that you shared those great nights and that success with. And then, as time goes on, the new people around you, or some of the people around, they weren't there. They don't know, and that thing is, you'll regret. You may regret, including me sometimes. I regret what I've said and whatever. But Naz, he's always said he should never have gone. He's done that publicly, and I appreciate that he has had the decency to say that.
I think in boxing as well, it's especially profound now. New people can just emerge. Like, I'm sure you've seen the fighters who walk through here with just their trainer or their parent, and then when they get a bit of success, there's like 10 new people around them.
Oh, you look, Naz, on his. I remember he had a fight. It might have been the first fight, or certainly if it weren't the first, it was the second fight. Brendan had somebody on the bill in a 4-rounder, and he was in the corner. And I looked and I thought, well, who's upstairs with Naz? So actually, Bob Burrows, who I mentioned earlier, him and I went up to the dressing room. It was like a dance studio. And he was on his own, warming up. There was no one else in there with him. The confidence was unbelievable. But remember, Brendan also instilled a lot of confidence in his kids. He'd get them up in the middle of the gym, right, sing a song, or do this or do that. He gave his fighters a lot of confidence. And Brendan was responsible as well for all the Prince stuff. That wasn't me. Prince was that was his idea. And I went into dressing. We went in the dressing room, and he was doing all this. That's when he was doing all the somersaults and all those. And he said, I'm going to come out, Frank, and he's thrown a shot. He said, then here, go over, and I'm going to do the somersault, and that'll be it. And Bob Burrows was like, what's going on here? It's the strangest. It was just strange, surreal situation. But it's exactly what he'd done. When he got in the ring, bump, over, done the somersaults, got up and done all the thing. And he just had that unbelievable confidence to do that. But the point is, he was on his own in there. Now you fast forward 2 years later, you could put a turnstile on the door of the dressing room, and you probably made 100 grand with the amount of people who were crammed in there. All those people come out of the woodwork, all the advisors and this one and that one, they all came from nowhere. Some family, just out of nowhere.
We can't talk about Naz and not mention when he took him to Madison Square Garden in that fight against Kevin Kelly, where he just busted him up and broke him down.
Well, listen, Kevin Kelly had him on the floor a few times as well. I mean, that was he broke Kevin Kelly's heart in that fight. He broke him. Kevin Kelly was a good fighter, and he was in his hometown. And we did it, I think it was about 6 or 7 days before Christmas, and everybody said it was going to be dead, there'd be no people there. But we did. We had the highest grossing gate for a featherweight fight ever at the Garden. And it was, the place was absolutely rocking. I can remember Donald Trump was our guest. I remember him coming along, sitting with us, Piers Brosnan. So everybody was there. It was electric. The deal we'd done with HBO, because I went across to HBO for the fight, was that they, I wanted them to guarantee the advertising we'd get, because it was near Christmas. So over one of the big tunnels, they put a big banner across the tunnel. We had Times Square, Naz, Times Square, the whole building lit up with Naz. We'd done a tremendous PR job, and it obviously reflected that in the amount of people who were in the Garden. Nine sold out. and it was an electric fight. It was. I mean, down, up, both of them. And Naz done a job. But Naz at that time was just not doing some of the training he should have been doing. He started taking his foot off the gas. And there'd been a big break, big split with him and Brendan, and I got them back together again. And unfortunately, during that split, Brendan helped Nick Pitt, who wrote a really good book called the Paddy and the Prince. He said some disparaging things about Naz, and then they made it up, and then the book came out, and it was a big problem. You know, everything, you name it. But it's a good book, though. You know, he was a good writer, Nick Pitt. But it was a shame, and that was, you know, then it was trying to keep all that together and making things work. And I can remember when Michael Jackson wanted to see, like Naz, he came into New York to come and see Naz, wanted to see him train. Naz said to me, come over and see Michael. I said, I'm not going anywhere near him. He said, what do you mean? I said, you know what I mean. He's not like that. I said, well, why did he give that fella $30 million to settle then if he's not doing that? I said, the nonce. Yeah.
You've had some high profile people, celebrities at your shows, haven't you, Frank, over the years?
Yeah, that's lots of people over the years, yeah.
Gordon Ramsay?
Gordon, I've known Gordon since nobody knew Gordon.
Oh, right, okay.
Me and him go back a long, long time. You know, back to the Orangery when he had before any TV series or anything. Yeah. He's always a big boxing fan. Yeah, Gordon's been a pal.
He was there in February, wasn't he, for the Wild fight?
Yeah, he come out for that. Yeah. He was out. He's I've known him and been a patron of his restaurants for years. Loads of people over the years. You know, you meet. I've been lucky. I've been very lucky with all the, you know, to go to the places I've been able to go to, meet the people. You know, when I was on the 4th floor at the council block, I never thought all these things were ever going to happen to me. You know, I never thought my life was going to be like this. I never even for 1 minute thought I'd be involved in boxing.
I didn't know Pierce Brosnan attended that fight though. With
Pierce was there, yeah, came there. Pierce came there. He just finished one of the bomb fields, I think.
Okay. Of course, you had, I think it was with Showtime, wasn't it? You had like Calzaghe, Naz, Frank Bruno.
All of them. Well, I launched with a guy called Gary Shaw in America, and Jay Larkin, who passed away, was a real good friend of mine. He was the president. We launched Showbox. That Showbox series was us. We launched that. So we did shows in America and shows here. We did Johnny Tapia in God, when was it? God, I can't remember what state it was down south. We did a really big show down there, and it was their highest. It was the highest attendance they'd ever had in any boxing event down there. Fabulous show. We did a guns for tickets thing, where people handed guns in. It was a gun amnesty. So we tried out to do our bit and all that down there, and it was a really good turnout. And Johnny Tapia was a great guy. He was an exceptionally good fighter, and had a terrible upbringing.
Just moving on, of course, you've known Bob Arum for years, and you're still working with him.
Yeah.
Before we come on to him, just want to ask you about your time dealing with Don King. How was that?
Well, we had some really great times. But at the end, there was problems, and there were problems, and I wasn't happy, and so it came to an end. You can read about it in the book, and I'm not saying anything about the book now for nearly 9 minutes.
15 minutes. I'll give you longer than that.
Well, I've got to get in another 16 quickly.
No, but yeah, working with Don before, obviously it went wrong. How was that, Frank?
It was fun. It was great. We had some great times together. We had a really good relationship. We worked hard. And it was great for him. It was great for British boxing. It was great for everybody involved. We basically pulled all our resources and put on some brilliant shows in the UK and gave British fighters the home advantage rather than having to go to the States to fight. Some really good nights. I mean, and all the guys you mentioned, they didn't just, it's a funny thing. Years ago, a fighter would win a title, a British fighter would win a title. He might have a defence of his title. And if you look at their records, a lot of them sort of lost their title after 2 or 3 fights. We really changed all that. These guys had real long career, long times as world champions, and what I was really pleased with, all my guys were beating their guys. We was picking the right moment and the right time. You know, Kawasaki Lacey. Joe Kawasaki was the biggest underdog ever. Everyone thought he was going to get knocked completely out. Hardly anybody. I don't think anybody picked him. The Yanks thought they was going to do a job on him. And, you know, people say after, Lacey, going into that fight, everyone thought Lacey was going to be the next big thing. He was world champion going into it. He weren't challenging Joe. He already was a world champion. It's unification. Joe done a great job. We put Nigel Benn in that terrible, tragic fight. Exciting but terrible and awful, tragic fight with Gerald McClellan. Frank Bruno against Oliver McCall. Oliver McCall had knocked over Lennox. So you think about it. No one thought Frank Bruno was going to win. No one thought Naz. And all our guys, you know, we really done well. I was so pleased with the matches and how I got them into the positions where I got them into. You know, and they were all underdog. Every one of them was an underdog. Not one of them was favourite.
Would you say that Kawasaki, even though Naz Kelly was just an unbelievable fight, and would you say that's the most high-profile fight you've been in, Kelly and Naz?
High-profile
in terms of like the build-up to it, and as you said, Naz on
no, I think no? You know. Well, we done. I mean, the big fight was Joe against. Bernard Hopkins was a big fight. You know, Bruno, Mike Tyson. That was a massive fight. I mean, massive. We launched pay-per-view in the UK with it on Sky. That was the first ever. It's the only way we could do the fight. We had to have pay-per-view, and we launched pay-per-view in the UK. It's back. Was that in the 90s, mid-90s? So we did that fight. That was huge, and I think Sky back then only had about just over 3 million subscribers, and 660,000 people bought it. Think of a percentage-wise to what the numbers are today, where they got, you know, I don't know what their subscribers are today, but they're nearly 3 times that.
But in terms of those two fights, because you look back at that, and as you said, Joe Kawasaki, no one gave him a chance, and he absolutely schooled him. And obviously the Naz Kelly fight was just a thrilling fight. Would you say those are the two highlights of your career? In terms of the wins for your fighters?
No, I think another underdog, massive underdog, was Tyson Fury and Wilder. The first fight, I fancied him for my life. He got robbed. And the second fight, I said he'd stop him. I really knew he would stop him. Yeah. I knew, you know, you look at the styles, I knew he could stop him. You know, and again, Tyson, not in the first one, both of the fights went in for some reason as an underdog. I can understand the first fight because of the weight, time out the ring, but he went in as an underdog in both those fights. People tipping against him. I get it. Danny Williams, taking Danny Williams out to fight Mike Tyson. Again, Danny was there to make up the numbers. I said to Danny at the time, first round, 2 rounds max, you'll be fighting vintage Mike Tyson. He'll be hitting you with everything. Tuck up, absorb it. I said, you stop him. And he did.
Can we talk about Mike Tyson?
You can talk about him if you want to.
How was he? You've worked with everyone in boxing. How was working with Mike Tyson? Obviously, I think you've done a couple of fights with him here.
He was first fight, he was as charming as there can be. The second fight, he was a nightmare.
What was the situation regarding him getting chased out by the police out the UK?
Well, the police in Scotland wanted him out of Scotland, and he said he lost his passport. I don't know what was going on, and they just took him straight down to the airport and put him on a plane. I think it was Gatwick.
Did you have a lot of conversations with him?
With conversations?
No,
yeah.
Confrontations with Mike?
No, I had one confrontation.
Just one?
One confrontation, and that was it.
How was that?
Well, it depends whose version you want to hear. Some say that I was supposed to have had broken ribs and broken jaws and all this stuff. Yet, go online, because everything's online these days. Go and look at him getting into the ring. And there I was standing in the ring. I had to bend over to get in the ring, so I never had no broken ribs. And I was chewing gum to show and I never do that in the ring, stand in the ring. I'm chewing, blowing, and I remember blowing bubble gum in the ring because I never had a broken jaw. It was just a complete lot of crap. We had an altercation, which was a surprise to me because I weren't expecting what happened, but it was settled. and he paid the bills and done all the things what he owed, and that was it.
Now I want to talk about another perhaps bizarre moment in your life, where you talked about this on TalkSport recently, where you got shot, Frank.
Yeah.
And just talk to me about that situation. Like, what do you even remember what happened after you got shot? You do.
I've got a good memory for some things.
So what, do you just remember being taken straight to hospital? What happened?
I remember getting out of my car, and I remember hearing a bang, and I thought it was a car backfiring. And then I looked round, and I see somebody standing there with a, like, all done up. And I looked, he's got a gun and he's like this. And I remember looking at the gun, because you would look at it, and it was shaking. And he was like, but he was too far away from me. If he'd have been closer, I may have tried to do something, but there was too much distance between us. And then I heard a click, and nothing happened. Then there was another bang, and I got this terrible pain in my side, right here. And I mean, first of all, I thought it was a joke to start with, and obviously it wasn't. But what happened is that I got hit here, and because of the angle I was at, it come out my side, and next minute I was being bundled in the back of a police van because the ambulances were on strike, and I was off to hospital, and that was it. That's what I remember.
You remember the journey in the police van as well?
Yeah, bumping about in the police van. I remember they'd done about 48-point turns. You think the police could do a nice 3-point turn, couldn't you? But no, they'd done it. I was banging up curbs, and I'm like, oh,
Not ideal when you've just been shot.
no, it weren't ideal, mate. And of all places, they took me to a hospital in Shooters Hill.
Is that a joke? But it was called Shooters Hill. I'm glad you're laughing about it now, Frank. Well, what was that time like in the hospital? How long did you spend there?
I discharged myself because I was. There was also, I mean, I can't go into that side of it because a lot of that. I'm not saying it to public. It is in the book, and it is what it is. But there was a lot of problems that it caused me. You know, somebody getting shot. Everyone wants to know what's what. A few newspapers wrote some libelous stories, which I sued them on. But like all things, when you're sued for libel, it takes about a year before it gets settled, and by then a lot of the damage was done. And it caused me a lot of business problems, and and obviously I discharged myself. I was back at work 10 days. I come out of hospital and I was went back to work for a few days. I lost a lot of weight. Which was probably good. That's why I called it the lead plan diet. I lost I think it must have been about 3 stone or something. I'd lost in a very short space of time.
Well, I'm sure that was a horrendous time for your sons. How old were they?
Oh, they were kids. Henry wasn't even born. My wife Susan was pregnant with him, and they were babies. I mean, they were young. Young was it like 1989? So they were like 4 and 2, something like that.
Okay. Well, let's close off with what's going on presently. And I mentioned Bob Arum. Of course, you are still working. He's still plugging away. His passion and dedication to the sport is just unbelievable, isn't it? It's still going today, and he still thrives off boxing. He
does. He loves it. I mean, that's his life. That's what he does. And he's been doing it a long, long time. I think the way things are going now, I'm like, you have to give me some of that weed. I need some myself now to sort myself out. But no, he's doing. He does a great job.
Yeah. I'm sure you've got some stories with him over the years as well. Bob.
I have.
Is that in the book?
It's all in the book.
And in terms of your sons, of course, you said that you didn't particularly want them working in the sport, that they'd gone to university, whether had a proper education. So how did they actually wind up in the sport? Because
unbeknown to me, because I was so absorbed with the business, and most of the shows are on Saturdays, so you're all week you're working, then Saturday you're at a show, then you're off home, you get home on a Sunday. So I weren't spending as much time as I should have spent with my kids, with the family, like I should have done, because I was like, this is the business I was in, and I wanted it, and I threw everything into it. So while I'm away doing that, they're becoming boxing nuts. They're looking at fights, and they become like that. That's all they wanted to know. They were just boxing mad. And I've got some old photos of them, like I mentioned it to you earlier. I've got George and Francis and George to say it with and George Foreman's he's holding George like this on his hand. Naz, the pair of them, they're just young kids. Frank Bruno, all of them, when they were real kids. But I didn't let them go to the shows until they were older. I wouldn't let them go to them young. I mean, I know, some people say they attended all these fights and see all these fights I've seen, but I don't believe it for one bit that they were at these fights. And certainly some of the things that are said are not actually factual to what happened on the night of the shows. My kids, they were kids. I didn't feel it was right. They were the right age to be going to shows and so forth. And anyway, they did. And in the meantime, they become boxing crazy, and that's what they do now. That's how they earn their living. They work here and do a fantastic job.
Also, your brother and his
the whole family. But we've all been, we've always been mad about the sport.
Yeah.
We're not sort of newcomers to it. We've been doing it for a long time.
How much impact have they had, though, your sons, Francis, George, Henry, on the success of this business?
Major, a lot of it. George is the CEO. Francis went off and done a couple of things before he got involved. He decided he wanted to do it, and he got back involved in it. And he's doing really well. He's managing some really good fighters now, some really good young talent he's got involved with. And he's starting, he's basically running with Marius, the Queensbury Poland, which is getting launched, which is good. They've got a deal with Polsat, so we're starting doing shows on a regular basis in Poland. So that's going to build up the brand there, and that's his baby. And he's worked very hard over the last couple of years with Marius to get it moving. And Henry, he works on the event side, and he's enjoyed it. And also looking after all our film side of it now. He's getting quite into that, and we've got a documentary coming out which he's had a bit of input into, so it's all good.
Well, that's the past, done the present as well, and now it's to the future. The likes of Daniel Dubois, Dennis McCann, Anthony Yard's got such a massive future still. It's just about these guys now. And have you got another 40 years in the sport?
Well, if I've got another 40 years in here, mate, I'll be 128. So if I do that, I'll tell you what, that'll be a Guinness Book of the Records job, won't it? Look, I'm just continue doing what I'm doing as long as I'm enjoying it and enjoying working with the people. We've got a great team. You talk about the boys. We've got, the rest of the guys here. Darren, Dev, Andy, Emma, Bianca, Tony, Gareth. Have I left anyone out? I'm leaving a brain. Ben. Yeah, of course, Ben. I've got. But all the guys, we've got a great team. We've got a really good team, and they've all worked out. And that it's not, that's what helps us, because we work so closely together, makes us successful.
Okay, Frank Warren. I know I've kept you long enough here, so I won't let you go. I will let you go rather now, but I won't let you go without mentioning your book. When is the release date? And tell us about the book. The book will come out probably at the end of December, early January. All right, look forward to it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Get a signed copy, is that all right?
Listen, mate, you can have a signed copy. You just bring your checky wecky up for the. Not a problem, mate.
Frank, thanks for your time looking back at the last 40 years, and let's see if you can do another 40, all right?
Please, God.
Is your debt causing you sleepless nights? Knock your debt out with Debt KO. And your debt won't be the only thing keeping you up at night. Debt KO, free, impartial advice on all your debt.